Washington Journal continues.
Welcome back. Rona Kobell's with us. She's a contributor to Reason magazine and a staff writer for the Bay Journal. And she's here to talk about her piece in October's Reason magazine, looking at the return of the hemp industry in Kentucky. Under the headline, Hemp Comes Home. Legal hemp has returned to Kentucky. Will the Fed step aside and let the industry flourish? Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So first things first, people hear hemp and think marijuana, but the two are different. Is that right?
Yes, they're different. They're from the same plant, which is called cannabis, but the active ingredient in marijuana is THC, and the active ingredient in hemp is CBD. So hemp cannot get you high. Even if you smoke a whole truckload of it, it's not going to get you high. But it has many medicinal properties and many other properties. This dress, in fact, is made of hemp, so you can do a lot of different things with hemp.
And is that why we're even talking about hemp now? Like, why is all of a sudden is this in the news? Why is it resurgent?
That's a great question. So there's been efforts over the past 3 years to make hemp legal federally because it's still a Schedule I drug. So that means if you try to grow hemp in a state where it is not legal to grow hemp, you could run into all kinds of problems. And even where it is legal, you still run into all kinds of problems because the banks are federally insured, there's federal crop insurance, all those kinds of things. And so the farmers that wish to grow hemp and the entrepreneurs that wish to process it are seeking a legal path to do so. And some states have found a path, like Kentucky has and Colorado, and other states are trying to get there. But overall, there needs to be kind of a overarching federal statute so that when you ship your hemp seeds across state lines, the DEA doesn't seize them, which has happened.
Yeah. So why did you focus on Kentucky? What's happening there that is of particular interest?
One thing that's really interesting about Kentucky is it's the 5th poorest state in the nation. Their economy has really been hurt. And they looked at this open window during the 2014 Farm Bill that allowed a path to legalize hemp. And they basically kicked open that window and made an industry. And I thought it was really interesting to look at, particularly because Kentucky is unlikely to legalize marijuana anytime soon. So it really became a business development decision, an economic development decision, and something to reinvigorate their farmland, which had been in tobacco for centuries. And tobacco, as most of your listeners are probably aware, is something we don't grow too much anymore. We've had a big tobacco settlement. We're trying to buy out tobacco farms. And so these tobacco farmers wanted to get into something else. They wanted to keep farming their land. And hemp was something that had been farmed in Kentucky for centuries. It was the major state that farmed hemp way back in the day. Henry Clay had a hemp farm. Many famous founders of our country also farmed hemp. And so when hemp was basically banned in 1937 under the Marijuana Tax Act, Kentucky farmers had to either give their hemp to the government or forfeit all of their profits. And a lot of them sort of held this spot in their hearts for the plant that they wanted to grow it again. So it's sort of an emotional issue as well as an economic one in Kentucky.
Yeah. And what are some of the industrial uses for it?
Well, as I said, you can make a dress like this one. Car parts, car dashboards. BMW is using it for a lot of their dashboards and their different parts of the cars. The other part of the plant that isn't fiber is called the woody herd, and you can use that in industrial for absorbents and sewage spills, that kind of thing, bedding for cattle, all kinds of things like that. And then there's also fuel, food. I have hemp seeds most mornings in my yogurt, very tasty, full of protein. And then there is also the cannabinoid oil part of it, which is really the most lucrative part, which can cure epilepsy and reduce seizures and rheumatoid arthritis. It's great for reduction of pain. So there's all those medical applications as well.
Let's take a couple calls. We have Cornelia calling on the line for Republicans, calling from Cottonwood, Idaho. Good morning, Cornelia.
Hi, good morning. To be honest, I was sitting here thinking about what I was going to say, but I'm really happy and applauding the return of the hemp industry, and I do believe the little bit I know about it is that I have a son who has been having seizures since he was 18 years old, and he's now going to be 38. And all he was getting was prescriptions that made him into a zombie, and they wanted to give him more and more prescriptions. And really he was going down a road of spiraling down into more and more serious seizures and more frequent seizures. And I heard about the hemp oil, and actually it was on C-SPAN. I heard an argument in Congress about the hemp oil, the CBD, and I did get some hemp oil. I did not get the CBD, but I got the oil because it's illegal in Idaho yet. And I tried it on my son, and he immediately started improving with his seizures. And then I finally heard that it's actually the CBD oil that is so helpful for the seizures. And so now we're just trying that. I'm only on my second bottle of that. It's fairly expensive, but I'm using it for him because he was really getting seriously ill with the seizures and even landing in the hospital. And so anyway, I really, really applaud this, and I think natural means and herbs for health is the way to go in our country rather than relying on the pharmaceutical companies to give our people more and more deadly prescriptions. And if you really look into it, the omega-3 fatty acids also that's in the hemp oil, I'm reading are very, very helpful for all kinds of things like heart problems, even mental problems, memory problems, and so on, that we don't get enough omega-3 fatty acids in our diet. And so I think if the American people would really start looking into the natural means of health and going that route rather than just relying on prescriptions, our country, our medical expenses in our country would be reduced drastically.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, and that's a story that I hear a lot, particularly in Kentucky, from people who were ill or their children were ill, and they started using the CBD oil and they saw immediate improvement. This is especially true for seizures, epilepsy, and rheumatoid arthritis and different kinds of pain. And so you bring up a really good point that you have to jump through all these hoops to get this oil, and it's not available in drugstores. You can't use a prescription to get it. And absolutely, we do have an opioid crisis in this country. And my own doctor, when I went in to be treated for bronchitis, he had read some of my pieces on hemp, and he said, "Oh, I have a patient who was addicted to opioids, and we switched them to cannabinoid oil, and they're not addicted anymore." And it's amazing. So I think there is a tendency among hemp enthusiasts to oversell hemp's curative properties, but I do think there is really something to it, that it can be curative, and there's no reason why you shouldn't have access to it.
In your piece, you write about the benefits to the Kentucky economy. You write, this year, more than 200 Kentucky farmers will grow close to 13,000 acres of industrial hemp, more than all other states combined. Kentucky has about 40 processors, and the agricultural department has approved 525,000 square feet of greenhouse space for extraction and cultivation. Hemp, illegal just 4 years ago, is now a multi-million-dollar business that employs hundreds of people. Tell us about some of the people you met in Kentucky and how this industry is changing their lives.
One thing that's really interesting about it is this sort of confluence of rural and urban people coming together. We hear a lot in this country about this great divide. You don't really see it among the hemp people. You've got kind of like these a little bit aging hipsters who are living in Louisville and Lexington and trying to, make food companies and such. And then you've got these older gentleman farmers who speak with kind of this buttery Kentucky accent, who are former tobacco farmers who are growing it. And you have the young people who want to market it and sell it. You've got a woman making soap in her kitchen with her mother. And then you have a guy in Louisville who's got maybe 15 employees, a company called Sunstrand, and they are big into using hemp to make auto parts and fillers for things like coffee mugs and that kind of thing. So you have a really diverse industry of people who've come at it from different reasons. And you do have people, like the caller suggested, who have gotten into it because they've had a health issue and they've become customers of the oil, and then they decide they want to try to make it themselves. So it's a really diverse group of people.
Yeah, let's go to Chris, calling from Waukegan, Illinois, on the line for Independence. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. Just a few comments. As far as the overall regulation of marijuana in the United States, I think they need to advance a little bit farther forward to the modern era. I think they should regulate it the same as alcohol. It really, like the previous caller said, I think we need to go back to a more natural form of medicine. Prescription drugs are great, and they do what they're supposed to do, although I think the overuse of them, especially opioids, is a problem. If you look at why marijuana and hemp were outlawed originally in the 20s and the 30s, some people believe it, some don't. I do. I think it was a racial aspect. I think they were trying to control immigration, and they saw marijuana legal legislation as a way to do that. Several of our former presidents grew hemp. George Washington, I just finished a book about him. Hemp plants and tobacco and all that other stuff. It has been a major part of the U.S. economy in the past, and I believe it could be again today. The crime that is caused simply because marijuana and hemp are illegal is ridiculous. Most arrests are for marijuana. If we can get that regulated to be the same as alcohol, which if you've ever smoked marijuana and ever drank alcohol, one, you can wake up in the morning and it's hard to function. The other one, you almost don't even remember you did it.
Yeah, I agree. It did stem from a lot of racism, the prohibition against both marijuana and hemp, and it continues to be a racial issue, especially the way that marijuana is enforced across the country. I live in Baltimore, so the disparity is particularly great where I live, although I'm sure every urban city has the same issues. It's been shown time and time again that African Americans and Caucasian Americans their marijuana consumption rates are the same, but the arrest rates for African Americans and Mexican Americans in particular are nearly twice what they are for everybody else. And so obviously there's an enforcement issue and there's a racism issue there. What I find interesting about the hemp and marijuana prohibition is they sort of had this they were forced into this uncomfortable marriage in 1937 when they both got banned together. And over the last several years, we've really seen a liberalization in marijuana laws. Many states now have medical marijuana, and quite a few are moving towards legalizing it for recreational uses. And so marijuana kind of seemed to have gotten the good end of the divorce here because those laws are being liberalized, whereas the hemp laws have been much slower to be liberalized. And as we mentioned before, hemp is not a plant that can get you high. I just find it interesting, and I think part of the reason why hemp has been slower to become legal than marijuana is that there are lots of industries that really don't want to see a natural product become available. The pharmaceutical industry, maybe some of the makers of nylon and polyester. That's what sort of put it in the doghouse way back when, and I think those forces are still very much influential in our country today.
Even though the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, his home state is Kentucky.
Yes, and he's been very supportive of hemp. He hadn't been in the past, but something really interesting happened in Kentucky. Jamie Comer, he had been the Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner. He ran for Congress, and he won by a wide margin, the widest margin of any Republican in Kentucky that year. And Mitch McConnell took notice of that, and his win was pretty much about hemp. That's why he won Agriculture Commissioner, which is an elected position in Kentucky, and that's why he won in Congress. And the Majority Leader looked at the issue and he realized that this was a huge economic development issue for his state, and he's become very supportive. Rand Paul's been very supportive. Congressman Massey from Kentucky, who's also a farmer, and Congressman Comer. So you have the Kentucky delegation very supportive of it, and then you've got the liberal flank, Jared Polis of Colorado, and the congressmen and senators from Oregon and California who really support it. So hopefully there will be a move towards bipartisanship in Congress, and we can get something passed that will allow people not to be treated as criminals for growing a plant that is about as harmful to you and as likely to get you stoned as radishes. I mean, that's what we're talking about, really.
Let's go back to the phones. We have Mari calling from Great Falls, Virginia on the line for Democrats. Good morning.
Hello, I'm Mari, and I'm calling. I'm a supporter of the Borgen Project, which is an organization that lobbies Congress on behalf of international aid. And I was wondering, I've heard that hemp has a lot of uses in infrastructure, things like hemp concrete, that is actually really cheap to use. So I was wondering, what are the potential, if hemp was completely legalized, basically, what the expansive effects could possibly be as far as infrastructure and helping other countries?
Well, there are houses that have been made out of hemp in Europe, and they're doing some of that work in Asheville. From what I can see so far, it's sort of at the demonstration stage. I don't think the Toll Brothers needs to worry that they're going to be put out of business quite yet. But like with all the other uses of hemp, this is a plant that's just coming back to us. And so the potential of the plant is enormous, and we don't really know quite where it's going to go. Could it replace insulation? Could it be healthier to breathe? A lot of portable classrooms are in our schools are filled with toxic chemicals that are in the building materials. Perhaps hemp could alleviate some of those problems. I think when it's legal, we'll see all kinds of experimentation at universities and with entrepreneurs, but we're kind of not quite there yet in terms of what we're able to do because of the legal restrictions on the plant.
Got a couple of tweets here. One is from Vivian Shepherdson, who writes, health food store and grocery store hemp oil is not the same as CBD or whole plant extract. Buyer beware. Is that the case?
That's true, yes.
Okay. And this other one writes with a question. Please discuss the environmental benefits of industrial hemp.
Oh, that's a great question, because my full-time day job is to write for the Chesapeake Bay Journal, and in that job I do a lot of stories on farming. And what we've come to in the United States of America is very much a monoculture of agriculture. We've got corn, soybeans, and wheat. And we also grow industrial animals, chickens where I live, and cows and pigs in other places. And what the hemp does is it replenishes the soil when you grow it. And so you basically give your soils a break. The other thing right now with hemp, we have obviously a very large problem with pesticides, and we're losing our monarch butterflies because of GMO seeds and this kind of thing. At the moment, the EPA has not approved any pesticides for either hemp or marijuana. So no cannabis plants right now are able to have a pesticide on them, which means that the farmers are using natural pest remedies, which is much more labor intensive for them, but it's better for the environment. And so there's many ways in which hemp is going to be able to replenish the soil, and it could even be something that the Department of Agriculture could sanction as a cover crop that you could put on your fields when your fields aren't growing corn or soybeans to sort of help the soil recover.
All right, we have Jack calling from Scottsdale, Arizona on the line for Democrats. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, there's a lot to peel back here. First of all, to let your guest there know, the reason we're looking at this hemp industry just started in Arizona. It's all going to be a slow process, even the marijuana is, because this boils down to one thing: money. Okay, money dictates everything. Getting to the alcohol. Let's compare that just for a second. Yeah, we got back into alcohol. Now we have, alcoholism. 50,000 people a year killed in car wrecks. The bottom line here is the alcohol industry dictates because of money, though. There's billions of dollars involved. The reason that marijuana and all the so-called opioids, that opioids is small. Them people quit because of the money, because then they go into heroin. Look it up. Almost all the overdoses of heroin. Where does that come from? Mexico. They just found a fentanyl bust somewhere yesterday that had like 50 pounds. They said it was enough to kill 5 million people. Until we quit all the drugs and start over, okay, start over. I'm not disagreeing that some of these are good benefits, okay? But the money will always dictate everything, okay? And until it's properly put into the right associations, it's not going to work. It's going to be underground, or the money will dictate everything.
I would encourage you to think about hemp the way you would think about switchgrass or think about soybeans or think about barley. It is connected to cannabis. It is cannabis. It is connected to marijuana, but it is not a drug that you can use and smoke. And so we're in a situation now where, as a plant, it resembles the plants that I just named, but it is not treated like those plants. In some states where hemp is marginally legal, you need to register your field. You need to tell the DEA where you are. In other states, like Virginia has got this pilot program. If you want to grow hemp, you need to be fingerprinted. Imagine having to be fingerprinted to grow corn. So if we want this plant to achieve all of its benefits, the economic development benefits, as well as the soil benefits and the benefits for the rural economy and the health benefits and everything, we need to give it a chance. We need to get it out of its jail and let it flourish. And there may be things that we think it can do that it won't do, and there may be things we haven't even thought of yet. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago that you could make a car out of hemp or a house? But I think our trouble seems to be when we consider this to be a controlled substance, which it is unfortunately registered as. But that is just a definition that Richard Nixon gave it in the 1970s. It does not resemble that in any way, shape, or form.
We have Carol now calling from East Setauket, New York, on the line for Republicans. Good morning, Carol.
Yes, I'm a conservative Republican, and I am totally for hemp and for marijuana. I've never used it, but I know the uses that it has. In Kentucky, they were using it to make rope. It's a phenomenal product for making rope. And marijuana is very helpful when it comes to bipolar disorder and for seizures and for pain management. And unfortunately, they keep saying, especially Sessions, which makes me angry even though I like him, that it's definitely a gateway drug. It is not a gateway drug. It has never been a gateway drug. And unfortunately, the gateway drug is alcohol, if they really wanted to be honest. I've never seen anybody get in an accident, abuse someone, get violent on marijuana. It's a calming drug. It does just the reverse. You know, I would love to see it legalized. The only problem I have is with the oils. They're charging $250 for a little 4-ounce, 8-ounce bottle of it that most people cannot afford to buy. They're going to use the drugs because most people have drug companies and they're paying $5 for their drugs, which we're overtaxing hemp and marijuana. It's ridiculous what we're taxing something that would work. It's becoming abusive, and it bothers me because I think marijuana is a great drug. I think hemp can be used very beneficially.
Well, it sure would be nice to be able to go to your pharmacy and get a drug that could be used to treat your epilepsy and not pay a fortune for it, and have that drug be based in a natural oil that you knew exactly what was in it. And we're not there yet. We're not there yet by a long shot. But the hope is that when and if the federal hemp law passes, not only will the medicinal properties of hemp be treated like the medicinal properties of any other things, but also the food. So hemp is not able to get the designation as generally regarded as safe from the FDA, so that hemp products could be sold just like cereal bars or anything else that we buy. It is a nutritional product, but it has to go through kind of a separate procedure, and that means that it's harder to get hemp seeds. And I mean, you can find them at Walmart and Trader Joe's, but it's a little bit harder to get the other hemp products that people might want.
And our last call for this half hour is from John, calling from Ellenton, Florida, on the line for Independence. Good morning, John.
Hello. What I've noticed about marijuana is it suppresses the ego. So you've got the business community doesn't like that they sell you stuff through your ego. The political people control people through their ego. So I've just noticed that from using marijuana. That's what it sort of does.
I'm not really a marijuana user, so I'm not going to be able to take that one. But I would encourage people, again, to think about marijuana and hemp as different. They share a root, but they are really different plants, and they have really different uses. And I do personally think that marijuana should be legal, but I also believe that that should be a separate discussion from hemp, which as I said, is like a radish or a soybean in terms of its makeup and what it can do, and is just an economic development powerhouse with the products it can make. And so, as much as it is perhaps tempting to sort of couple them, I really do think that they are different.
Rona Kobell is the contributor to Reason magazine. We've been talking about her piece in the October edition, looking at the return of hemp in Kentucky. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Coming up.